Hello, in this daily tip video from Wolfe Realty, we'll be talking about best practices negotiating home inspection repairs. So let's dive right into it. Overall, I think it's important to realize that the buyer has options and the seller has options as well. If you're a buyer's agent, it's probably best to advise your buyer that one, they can accept a credit for the repairs, two, they can have the item escrowed, or three, they can have the seller fix the item. We're finding that oftentimes the credit is the path that mostly is being chosen. And when I say that, it really just solidifies that the buyer has control of the work, that the buyer can do it on the buyer's timeline, and is not postponing closing in order for these repairs to work. And the buyer also has that quality control that a seller who's really vacating the property and moving away and looking to do it as cheap as possible is not going to take that due diligence. Now, I'm not saying all sellers, but some of them, right? All right, so they can definitely do that in an escrow as well, but be mindful that if you put the money into an escrow account for that repair, it's going to have to go through underwriting with the lender. So if you're doing a cash purchase, that type of escrow can be done a lot easier. But if you're doing a loan, chances are that may throw a wrench into underwriting, and it may be a lender required repair prior to closing. So that's another important thing. Now, sometimes we're finding that the sellers are paying the buyer's chosen contractor at the time of closing. Now, be aware that if that path is chosen, that typically, the title company does not know, the lender does not know that that work's not done, but it is on the seller's statement at the title company. Now, if the lender or the title company is aware that that repair was not made, but the contractor's just being paid, that could throw an issue into it because you may not be able to get mechanics liens coverage. And when I say that, mechanic liens coverage is to say after closing, we guarantee that a mechanics lien will not come back on this property. Well, if they pay for the work, but then let's say something in the work hits a snag and the contractor charges more, but then the buyer doesn't pay that and they're relying on that seller paid item to cover that work, the contractor could ultimately file for a mechanics lien against the property and be well within their rights. And so if a title company realizes these items, they may not offer lien coverage. If the lender realizes these items, they may require it to be a condition of closing. So be mindful of the escrow or paying out the contractor at closing. So let's talk about time to get bids. It is very important that your buyer gets the bids during the actual inspection phase. And even if you have to extend the inspection phase in order to get those bids, you can initiate a specialist inspection period, and that is in the Missouri Realtor inspection portion of the contract where you can extend that with just a notice, and the form number's in there, so feel free to use that. Now, another thing to prepare for is, I would say for the buyer, is to prepare the buyer that they may not get everything on the inspection completely repaired by a seller, and that they may not get enough money to cover the repairs that they want to make. Most sellers don't mind doing some repairs. Some sellers are very hard, fast, no, I will not repair anything. I'm selling this as is. But if they don't get enough money, at least they're making steps toward getting that property as cheap as they can in the condition that it currently is, all right? Another benefit of having the seller offer a credit for those repair items is that the seller has the ability to walk away from liability, okay? And that's really passing that on to the buyer so that when the buyer does the final walkthrough of the property, they're not complaining about the quality of the repairs, or they're not hovering with that after closing for something that they feel like the seller did ultimately to them. Another thing to be mindful of when you're doing the actual inspection and getting contractors to come out and give bids, contractors are getting very sensitive to the fact that the real estate agent or the buyer calls them in order to get a bid for these items that they negotiate for the credit of that repair, but then the contractor never gets to do the work or gets paid for their time. And so it's important to remember that a contractor may charge for a bid, and it's important for the buyers to understand that if they can't find a contractor to do it, they can offer to pay the contractor in order to give them a bid. And then if the contractor gets the job to do the work, then the contractor could knock that price off of the actual work that's being completed. Those are all things that they can ask for in their negotiation. Now, sight unseen quotes are typically inflated. So there's a lot of sight unseen companies out there that will do estimates for repairs. But if a buyer thinks, oh, I'm going to get this quote from this company and, they don't have to go look at it or anything like that, chances are that quote is going to be drastically inflated so that there's room for errors in that quote. Now, and a seller may not pay that overall amount of the quote that's inflated. So here is your daily tip. I would love to know other strategies and issues you've had with negotiating inspection repairs. Drop them below or give me a call. Thanks so much.